Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday, July 15th, in this 15th week in Ordinary Time of our liturgical year. So, a story about a certain saint goes like this. In the second half of the 13th century, this saint was appointed to become a cardinal by the Pope. And in those days, you didn't receive the message via a phone call or a letter or an email. The Pope actually had to send out a delegation to travel to wherever the person was in order for them to learn of their appointment. And they brought with them a special red hat, the galero, which back then looked something like a sombrero, but it was the most important symbol of the cardinal's office. So the delegation showed up to see this saint, and they found him washing the dishes. And he actually sent them outside to wait for him so he could finish doing the dishes. Legend has it that he asked them to leave the red hat out on a tree outside. And so the saint finished washing the dishes and then came out to greet the papal delegation. The saint in this story is the saint whose feast we celebrate today, Saint Bonaventure. He lived from 1221 to 1274. His name was John at birth, but another story says that as a young boy, he became very ill, and his mother took him to see a very holy man who lived during their time, a man named Francis of Assisi. Francis took the boy and prayed over him, and while doing so had this vision of what this boy, what his life would be like and grow up and become. And he, they say, proclaimed, "O bona ventura," "O good fortune." And so the little boy John recovered from his illness, and from then on was known as Bonaventure. Bonaventure eventually entered the Franciscan order, which was still very new at the time. St. Francis died while Bonaventure was a young boy. And so that shows just how new it was. And the Franciscan order today is known as one of the most well-known orders of religious men in the Catholic Church. But at that time, when St. Francis founded it, it was considered to be a very radical idea of how to live one's call as a disciple of Christ. Francis and his followers vowed to live a very extreme form of poverty and simplicity and deep love for Jesus and for one another. And they pushed aside all the normal trappings of the church at the time that had become very much influenced by wealth and politics. So Bonaventure grows up and does a lot of amazing things, and one of which is to become the head of the Franciscan order and write down and organize the way the Franciscans would live. And he's considered to be the second founder of the Franciscans. Now, what made him very special is not the fact that he had this brilliant mind. He went on and got all sorts of degrees, and he was a friend and colleague of St. Thomas Aquinas, another very brilliant man of the church. Both became doctors of the church. But what sets St. Bonaventure apart is his deep spirituality and how it allowed him to stay grounded in the dailiness of life. And he shows to us that the path to sainthood is not about external honors or achievements, but being faithful to the ordinary kind of humdrum tasks of daily life. And it's the way we do the daily things, our level of commitment to our own personal callings, that really is what matters. And no amount of external recognition can bring about the holiness that was evident in St. Bonaventure. So I think there's a connection between this sense of holiness of St. Bonaventure and the gospel reading that we hear today. And I'm going to read that for you now. It's from the Gospel of Matthew. At that time, Jesus exclaimed, I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. For although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to the childlike. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. So in this passage, we hear Jesus praying about what is most important in being a follower of Christ. And it's not something that's revealed to those who have a big education or are considered wise and learned, but to the childlike. Not childish, childlike. And what is the disposition of a child that allows them to be able to receive Jesus? And what is Jesus trying to say about that? So when you think about children, right, they have this open-hearted way about living, like their heart wide open to everybody and to everything. They're very trusting. They're joyful. They're full of love. They're curious. And they always seem in awe of everything around them. That the world is just this amazing thing to be explored and discovered. In reading about St. Bonaventure, it seems that he also tried to live with a wide openness of heart as he lived dedicated to Christ. You may have heard that St. Francis was often known as the fool for Christ, that he was so in love with Christ that nothing else mattered. And others saw him as kind of foolish in this, but it was that intense kind of love that kept him focused on Christ, that kept him focused on what matters most, loving God and loving the poor and the most neglected. So what is St. Bonaventure in our gospel today asking us to reflect on? So maybe a couple things that I can suggest. Are our hearts wide open to Jesus and to those around us? And if not, what is keeping us guarded? What's holding us back from really allowing Jesus to seize our hearts? And how can we be free to really live in love with hearts that are wide open? Another thing could be, how often do we allow ourselves to experience silence? There's so much noise in our lives today, right? So much stuff on the news and the internet and everywhere. And I think that clutters our hearts and is not helpful at all in our ability to hear God. So how can we carve out more time for silence and quiet so we can hear God's voice within us? In that story we heard about Bonaventure doing the dishes, it's a story about what it means to stay in the moment and not letting distractions pull us away from being present, not only to the moment, but present to those who are around us, to whatever we're doing. And there are so many things that can distract us. But maybe we're being called to look at how we can be more attentive to the people right around us, to give our full presence to what is right at hand. So those three things maybe to think about. How to let our hearts be wide open to Jesus. How to find some silence that we can carve out for ourselves. And the idea of being very present to what is right in front of us at any given moment. So as we close, I'd like to offer a prayer. Open wide our heart, O God, so that we can hear your voice in the daily moments of life. Bring us to a place of inner quiet so we can hear the cries of our brothers and sisters all around us. Help us to be present to each moment, even when I'm doing the dishes. Amen. So blessings to you and to all those you love. Please keep safe and well. And until we see each other again, I'm wishing you much peace and hope.